Good afternoon. The United States welcomes the meeting between the presidents of Sudan and South Sudan that took place in Addis Ababa last weekend, and the recommitment to the unconditional implementation of the September 27, 2012 agreements. The parties must now finally move from rhetoric to action by clearly implementing the agreements reached in Addis Ababa without further delay. The parties now have agreement on a plan and a timetable for implementing the safe, demilitarized border zone. Now, at the upcoming Joint Political and Security Mechanism meeting on January 14th, the two governments, Sudan and South Sudan, must ensure that their respective armed forces immediately withdraw and deploy the Joint Border Verification Monitoring Mechanism without delay. We also note the agreement between the parties to instruct the ABA Joint Oversight Committee to urgently constitute the ABA Area Administration, Council, and Police Service. Resolution of ABA's final status is critical to promoting sustainable peace. We share the assessment of the African Union Peace and Security Council that the AU High-Level Implementation Panel's September 21st proposal for ABA still provides a fair, equitable, and workable solution. This proposal provides for ABA's continuing special status. This proposal provides for ABA's continuing special status as a bridge between the two countries with guaranteed political and economic rights for both the Ngok Dinka peoples and the Missiriya, whatever the outcome of the referendum. We remain deeply concerned by the continued deterioration of the humanitarian situation in southern Kordofan and Blue Nile, and we received a briefing about that. We're also deeply concerned about the ongoing aerial bombardments by the Sudanese armed forces, including in civilian areas. The Security Council must work collectively now to press for immediate and unfettered humanitarian access, something for which the United States has been working for many months, particularly in the two areas where the humanitarian emergency has been acute for well over a year. The tripartite Memorandum of Understanding with the government of Sudan for emergency humanitarian relief expired late last year, and there's still no plans to jumpstart much-needed international humanitarian assistance, even as food security remains at crisis levels in many parts of the two areas. We urge the two parties to conduct urgent talks on humanitarian access, a ceasefire, and political resolution of their conflict.